So the title of the lecture today is Embodying VR and Motion Capture, a Performer's Perspective. In this lecture, I will explore the role of the performer, dancer, and actor, how to heighten the virtual experience for both performer and audience member, learn skill sets which can be applied to the specific kinds of work you will be facilitating, encourage you to build your own personal toolkit of embodied practices that best suit your VR and motion capture needs, and most importantly, provide you with a good foundation should you wish to delve deeper into the relationship between embodied practices and digital media. Now, from the perspective of starting a project with VR and motion capture, like with any project, I would say you always start from the brief. So to get a real sense of understanding both the virtual context you will be working in, but also the physical environment that you are working in as well, and really trying to sticking to the brief, which might be a little bit hard at times. And I will elaborate on this later by what I mean by sticking to the brief. From a physical standpoint, what is required of you and really understanding your role within the work. So I don't know if you're familiar, this is the classic T-shape. It is your troubleshooting place to start. I was in Italy last week, so this is Bubbly Gardens. I thought I'd give you some nice background for the lecture today. It was a sunny day, lucky me. So it's a T-shape, obviously here represented when you have all your markers in place and they're ready to record you in motion capture, you start with a T-shape. Why do we start with a T-shape? Well, the program has to record all your trajectory in space, and it's quite nice. It reminds me of the Da Vinci, a famous Vesuvian man. When you have problems with the recording, whether you're being captured in real time or in a studio where your movements are being recorded, you always return to the T-shape as sort of a foundation to start upon. The most important thing, to be a blank canvas. What do I mean by being a blank canvas? Firstly, abandoning the ego. This is quite hard. You really have a sense that you are a vessel through which the material is going to be activated. And with regards to that, it's really trying to start from a neutral standpoint. So finding a grounding in the neutrality so that you can become a variety of things in motion capture, which is the fantastic opportunity that you have when you are working with virtual reality. The most important is the clarity of intention because your movement is being recorded. And here I have a little extract, same environment. This is Bubbly Gardens and Florence. So that was just a little extract in terms of clarity of lines and orientation, trying to face the right direction. So I'm being recorded, and even when I'm changing direction, making sure that I finish and execute each movement as clearly as possible. Clean lines and finishing each movement become your best friend when you're working with VR and motion capture, whether you're performing as an actor and therefore using gesture, or as a dancer with perhaps more elaborate types of movement. The more vague the movement is, the harder it is for the program to register your physical presence. This is a slightly faster version. Very serious face there. So sustained versus fast tempo. This is a biggie in my book. Sustain is easier to capture, but sometimes you will be required to increase the tempo and again, trying to really keep the clarity of lines and finishing each movement. The other important element is to be able to repeat movement if necessary. And herein lies the question of improvise versus set material. I'm a big fan of improvised movement. I use improvisation in a lot of my work. I think it's great to find perhaps characters and different ways of moving. So exploring and experimenting in VR and sort of seeing what results come up. But then ultimately, I think set material is just more efficient. So whether you would want to go through a process of maybe exploring, experimenting a bit through the improvisation and then setting a movement pattern, you might find that is a little bit easier in terms of clarity and efficiency. Now, here I am with my 7-month-old kiddo. I'm pretending that her sock is a marker and imagining that she's a prop. Here we go. There you have it, in case you were wondering what was the sound in the background while I was recording. So going on to historical reference, working choreographically with technology and pushing the limitations of what a body can do. And this is one of my favorites, Merce Cunningham, if you're not aware of his work. He was one of the most prevalent choreographers in the postmodern age. He really pushed the envelope through his entire life. He relentlessly explored and experimented and didn't let age get in the way in the slightest. For he was 70 years old when he started working with the program technology dance forms. And this is an extract speaking about the use of technology in his work.
Throughout his career, Merce Cunningham embraced technology in his work. From early experiments with television and video to the use of computers, body sensors, and motion capture technology. These tools allowed him to sculpt, animate, and choreograph dance in entirely new ways and reimagine his understanding of the human body. In the 1990s, Cunningham pioneered the use of the computer as a choreographic tool. The software Dance Forms could model and animate the human form, allowing Cunningham to visualize sequences and phrases of dance on screen, which he would then translate to a dancer's body. It expands what we think we can do, Cunningham commented about this process. I think normally the mind gets in the way and says, you can't do that.
And moreover, Cunningham writes, it seems clear that electronic technology has given us a new way to look. Dances can be made on computers, pictures can be punched out on them. Why not a notation for dance that is immediately visual? So here we see really the opening up of the potential of the use of technology with particular relevance to choreography. Another thing I wanted to quickly speak about is working with physical states. You might find this also interesting from the perspective of acting. I love working with physical states. I think it's a fantastic way of freeing my own preconceptions of what my body is or should look like or is represented. I really, get a kick out of trying to imagine myself in a variety of ways. And I think that's why virtual reality is so exciting for me. Here is a very simple brief working with the brief of to move like a lion. It's just a very simple example, what is needed. So with regards to clarity of intention, I wanted to go back to the idea of articulation and skeletal articulation, because obviously with the markers, you're working with your trajectories in space and how you can work with that idea. So when thinking about a lion, my main interest would be, well, where is my articulation in my body? So this is just a brief example. So obviously I'm on all fours, and for me the most important thing is the head and wrist articulation, and then the grounding of the hand into the soil, and then moving in a sequential way through my entire body, and highlighting the head as one of the features and the hands that obviously become paws. So how can I integrate my scapula, and how can I imagine the backspace of my scapula and that articulation all the way through to the fingers? And then, so how do you kind of use that physicality to become something else? Obviously, there are many different examples of what you can work with. Now I will move on to Dazzle, which was a project I was involved in as a performer. This particular image is showing Dazzle at De Dolen in Rotterdam. And this was during the Tech Week, Immersive Tech Week of 30th November to 4th of December 2023. This is a fantastic collective. If you have an opportunity, check them out on either Instagram at Dazzle1919 or on their website. The collective is formed by Ruth Gibson, who is a choreographer, and Bruno Martelli. And together they form Gibson and Martelli, as well as Bina Roth and Alexa Pullman of Pet Porter Design and Art Collective. So this is one of the very early explorations that we were doing in London. And I will just show an extract and speak a little bit about it while it's playing. So we're all in motion capture suits here. And here I'm working with this screen in front of me. And my partners are also working in the motion capture background. Obviously, you can't see the screen in the back, but that's capturing the movements as well. So one of the important things to think about when you are being recorded is that, of course, you are in the movement and in the moment performing. So you're really embodying, but at the same time, you have to have a kind of external choreographic directorial perspective, because obviously you want to make sure that your movement is being captured in VR and is being clear in terms of the lines. And again, the markers, sometimes there's a bit of troubleshooting that needs to happen. For instance, the top of the head, the marker, if the marker moves even slightly, the head might look completely sideways. Similarly to when you're working with partners, and you'll see later on, if I hold somebody's wrist in a cover marker, then most likely the computer program will glitch. Here I'm moving into a physical state, sort of trying to remember what I used to call it. I think it was either the raver or the muscle man. I don't know why, but I was interested in flipping the script with regards to, again, what my character here is doing. This is an example of working in duo and the same work, which is Dazzle. This was at the Venice Film Festival for the Biennale Immersive. So they had a section dedicated to VR immersive experiences. So I think here it goes back to kind of that reference, right, to Cunningham's work and why clarity of lines really is satisfying to work with. You can see that my partner and I, our movements are being recorded and then projected on the back for the live audience that is sitting, but also there are the two audience members in the VR headset. And what you're seeing in the back is part of what they are experiencing in the VR headset. This is the Dolan, so just to show how different environments can affect the experience of this particular show that I was in. The same section. And obviously here you're seeing a much larger environment, so more capability for audience to see and to witness, more people in VR headsets. And of course, the potential of a few people experiencing this live. For me, the interesting thing about working with partners is, again, that you can really become a variety of things in the VR reality. And also, again, going back to that idea of Cunningham and the clarity of lines and why it's so satisfying to sort of have that in the back of the head when working. I think there's a direct correlation between sort of this performance that just happened, you know, not so long ago, and the fantastic work of Cunningham. And so here I'm just showing the back screen. And so what I find really interesting about working in VR from being gendered as female is that I don't have to be perceived as female in VR. I can be anything I want to be. I can be triangles, squares, and lines. And I find this really freeing and satisfying from a perspective of having performed 30 years in this body. And from another standpoint, if I, for instance, can't do a show for any reason, I can be there live in the VR reality. And the profound idea that if I pass, or when I pass, obviously, I will have a record somewhere in the VR reality of my movement. And I find that really, really exciting as an idea, and how we can archive the movement of performers throughout our current time, and how we can maybe continue to dance away in the VR reality. So now I want to move with the idea of working with VR with audiences in headsets and participatory audiences. So a lot of my background is in participatory work, in gallery context mainly. And actually my first gig was performing for this company called Punch Drunk. It was a crazy 3-hour shows 5 days a week, where you would be in a disused warehouse working with audience members, really close frame. I have found in my experience with VR that a lot of things can be applicable to both realms, the participatory and live and the VR reality. But with regards to VR, is how do you translate three-dimensional in the flesh physicality within the virtual realm? That kind of takes a different, slightly different take when you're working with VR. So with regards to that, since our brain and our senses respond very differently to virtual environments, when speaking specifically about VR, it is important to integrate a somatic understanding of the basic principles of sense perception, body mapping, and kinesthetic awareness. So just quickly, sense perception, If you were to Google it, the definition on Routledge would be the use of our senses to acquire information about the world around us and to become acquainted with objects, events, and their features. Traditionally, they're taken to be five senses, as you know: sight, touch, hearing, smell, and taste. Obviously, sight is the most primary when working in VR. But also this relationship to kinesphere, which was a term coined by Rudolf Laban. By kinesphere, Laban defined it as the kinesphere is the sphere around the body whose periphery can be reached by easily extended limbs without stepping away from that place, which is the point of support when standing on one foot. So even now when you're sitting, if you extend your arms and then reach them up, and kind of this trajectory of where your fingers are reaching, that's your kinesphere. So I guess a less fancy way of saying it would be this is also your personal space. And of course, it goes in the frontal side of your body, but also in the back. So if you imagine kind of a sphere surrounding your beautiful self. And of course, you have the physical kinesphere, but also the energetic sphere that surrounds your particular temperature and temperament, which is something that you will really see when you're working with audiences in close contact. So this is just the articulation of the kinesphere. The human in the left corner is leaning forward and lunging forward, and you can see that the kinesphere is moving forward with them. The kinesphere can also be included in a cube, and in the cube you can see all the trajectories in space that can make an icosahedron, which is a little bit what I was going in at the beginning when I was showing you me in the grass going through the trajectories in space. And there was sort of an improvisation around the idea of moving in the kinesphere. So the kinesphere always travels with you. So we just did explore the kinesphere, but I would recommend you to maybe try it out. Maybe even as an idea when you first get into the motion capture, might be like quite a nice thing for you to do, to just settle into the space and ground yourself, see what orientation you need to be in, and explore your physicality and so forth. I love this image. It is an image of body mapping, and body mapping is a concept that was developed from the Alexander technique, William and Barbara Conable. Our body map is the representation of ourselves that we have developed throughout our life and hold in our brain. A person's body map is their perception, understanding, and experience of their own body shape and size, plus how and where their own joints move and how their body functions. I find it really interesting how different people have different relationship to body mapping, and how prevalent, for instance, in this image is the face. That's because we pay a lot of attention to our face. And this is sort of the largest and the smallness of different elements is kind of how our brain connects to these different body parts. And this is, of course, a section of the motor cortex. And we have on the red side is the motor, and on the blue side is the sensory, and how they are so intermixed. And my relationship to my body mapping is so interconnected, not just with the physical, but with the sensorial, and how I relate to my relationship to touch, and how my receptors can include the environment as well. So when you're working with someone else's physical space, your role as a performer is to really, again, going back to that blank canvas idea, is to be a vessel. So you are there to provide experience for the audience and make sure that they are safe throughout their interaction with VR. So health and safety is always paramount. I mean, generally your employer does this for you, but if you're a director or you're just making your own work, it's really important to get audience to sign a waiver that they understand the terms and conditions of participation. With regards to that, really important to know if someone has any of these health conditions, which include migraine, being photosensitive, having epilepsy, having a serious heart condition, are pregnant and experience nausea, more that they experience nausea and more than pregnant, to be honest. I mean, I didn't have this problem when I was pregnant, but it's always good to know. Any other physical condition that may be affected by the change of light environment. And also if someone is claustrophobic, these would be the main conditions for which maybe being in a VR headset is not so suited for them. Know what senses the audience can or cannot rely on in the VR experience. So very often, my experience of being in these tech weeks is that a lot of it is the headset only. Now, it's an interesting idea from an embodied perspective to just have the eyesight, right? Going back to sense perception. I mean, my experience of being a headset without the commands of hands and feet, it really affects my idea of also periphery, of course, because I feel a little bit like the horse, with the blinders. So just like taking that under account when working with audience members, that they might need a little while to orientate themselves, especially if it's a new experience for them. Of course, the immediate moment that you include the commands of the hands and maybe even the commands of the feet, then it is a very different experience in my personal view of the embodiment from the perspective of the audience. So when working with audience, the multitasking becomes really the highlight of your performance. You have to really try to balance, like a circus performer, a variety of balls in the air. And sometimes, the program is recording you in real time. And then, as I said earlier, you are also taking care of the audience. So that is an interesting dynamic. And how to be embodied in your performance, but also how to have that kind of directorial, slightly detached perspective so that your part of your brain is checking, is the audience safe? Is the environment safe? Do they seem comfortable? Are they freaking out? All those things kind of happening in the back recesses of your mind while you're performing the actual work. And the idea of reading the room. So going back to the idea of the kinesphere and the personal space, that you have the physical space and the energetic space. It becomes this sort of elusive art of learning how to interpret the body language and other nonverbal cues of the audience. With regards to working with audiences that have tech experiences versus non-tech experiences, this is really quite straightforward to recognize, for instance. So the tech geeks will be really comfortable being in VR because obviously they spent lots of time in VR. They might move around a lot. They might be a bit more confident and risk-taking, which means that your job is to see that they're safe while interacting with them. And that's a real skill. I mean, also kind of like the relationship between being a live human embodied person and then working with someone who doesn't see you as a live embodied. So I've had moments where I've had some audience members trying to kick and shoo. And I find that quite interesting. So sort of trying to duck their kicks whilst doing quite intricate choreography. That was quite fun, actually. And then working with people with no experience in VR. And generally, there's kind of a freeze reaction. They'll be most likely stationary. And in regards to that, you just want to try to kind of keep it nice and simple. Less is more, keeping the engagement with them to a minimum so they can feel comfortable and get to know their surroundings. If you do make contact with an audience member, but this goes in general with any participatory work, taking a little bit of time exploring maybe various uses of touch. I mean, I would love to have you in a room and work with you physically, but in the lack of that, maybe take a moment when you finish this workshop or in your own time or whenever is suitable for you to kind of think about your relationship to touch and the various uses of touch in terms of soft touch versus firm touch. A little tip of the trade. I tend to use soft touch when I'm trying to provide support and security, but then more firm touch, which is still very respectful and very clear, almost like a two-finger approach or a very directional approach of the touch when I'm protecting someone and making sure that they're safe. For instance, if someone's a tech geek and they're really gone crazy with the movement and they're nearing the edge of the stage and they're going to fall off, then those are the moments where you use that kind of physical firm touch. Notes on tech. Be open to the possibility that it will or may crash. And like any show, the show must go on. So think on your feet, be ready to provide the continuity for the audience member. So if the disaster that the show is, everything's going upside down and you gotta just keep it cool, keep going. And if the tech is having trouble, back to your T-shape. It's useful for you to experience the headset first, goes without saying, so that if you are doing a performance which has VR, you've experienced yourself being in it. And sometimes I try to pretend to be a different kind of physicalities to see how that's just something that I do in my back of my mind to kind of think, if I were this person, how would I feel? Again, what are the potentials, someone who's really comfortable, and what are the potentials for someone who's less comfortable and can still have a fantastic experience in VR, which is what the aim is. E is for essentials. So just going back to the beginning, know your brief, stick to it. Less is more, abandon ego. What you think will look good isn't necessarily the case. Expectation management, yours and your clients. Multitasking is key. Tech first. What it can do will dictate what you can do.